This is where we begin our Beaver politics tonight. So I'd appreciate everybody popping on their mics. We're going to keep it off for about 30 minutes, and we're going to give our guest a chance to speak. We're going to respectfully ask nobody but the host to interject for that 30 minutes. And then we're going to back off and give you guys an opportunity to have that conversation. Our guest tonight is Frontline Feminist, and we are Beaver Politics, if anybody doesn't know us. We are two ladies here. Our third one isn't available tonight, unfortunately, but I know she's with us in spirit. And we have all come together with a passion to talk about politics and or social justice issues, and bringing Canadian voices together to have strong, powerful, uplifting conversation. I'm going to hand it over to Nerdy so she can share some information with you.
What a question. I'm sorry, there's a, check the comments.
I already did. I already looked at it. It's fine. Yeah, I already addressed it. It is not a YT only space. All right. Just some technical things for everyone. Hi, Murphy. So if we can make sure we're tapping on the screen. So if you tap on the Beaver Politics picture right there or right below, you can see there's a gap in between the writing and where the pictures are. That's a great place to tap because you're not going to risk hitting any comments. You can tap there. So we're still in Live Fest right now. Tapping is clapping. It gives us any points that we get for Live Fest. And we also do have, if you can share it out to a bunch of friends as well, best way to do that is hold down on the Beaver Politics picture, and then it'll get a pop-up screen, and you can go send to everybody that's on there. And that's the easiest way to share it out. So you get one share per person instead of 10 shares, or one share for 10 people that you're sending it out to. If you like what you see today, give us a follow. If you really like what you see today, you can subscribe to us. We do have our subscriptions up there. It's $5.49 Canadian. And then if you do month to month, like a monthly subscription, you get a discount on your first month. It gets you access to our cool stickers that we have in the chat. And then you also have access to our Discord, where we just get together to talk politics. We, send out little, you get notifications of when we post videos. You get notifications of when we go live, all inside that Discord. And join our team up top as well. There's a little heart up at the top. It's 1 coin to do that. We also do have our gift goal as well. So we have the Fest Burst going on right now because of Live Fest. 1 coin for every one of those. And we are right now in the bonus time for Live Fest. So between 6 and 8 is bonus time. So every tap, every comment that's made, and every gift that's given is double points. Heart means also help as well. Thank you. Thanks for the gifts. And then last but not least, we also do have a YouTube. I'm working on getting it so we can do the YouTube as well, live, but for right now we're just on here. But we do have the YouTube as well. I will be uploading whatever we do today on later tonight or tomorrow morning. It'll show up on there. So. And I think that is all. So I am going to hand it over to Frontline Feminist.
All right. How's it going, everybody?
Good. How are you?
Well, that's a loaded question nowadays, isn't it?
It is. I'm super stoked that you made it tonight. I see you out there every day doing the work. Tell us what inspires you.
What inspires me is probably where I come from. My family immigrated to Canada when I was 10 years old. We come from Romania. If any of you guys know about the history of that area, then you know that Romania lived under a very oppressive dictatorship until 1989. So as I was growing up, my parents kind of always warned me about what it could look like to, see the characteristics of a tyrant. And I was very lucky to have parents that were very much on the left, probably because of this. So I feel lucky that I've never had to, have quarrels with my own family about who we're going to vote for. But it's that fear, to be brutally honest. Like when we found out that Putin was going to come to power, we found that out in about 1998. We were seeing his rise to power already as he was campaigning already. And my parents just knew this guy's going to come to power. He's going to be a dictator. Like, we need to get out of this country now because they could potentially come for us, because they have so often in our history. And what's really scary right now is we just had a far right-wing politician rise to power in Romania, kind of like overnight. He got popular through TikTok. Half the country didn't even know about him. There's going to be one more set of elections December 8th to figure out who's going to win, but it looks really bad. He's divided our country completely, and what's happening here and in the States is now happening there too. Wow. And like, my parents spent the whole weekend crying when they found out. He is very pro-Putin. Everybody knows that he's very buddy-buddy with Putin, and he wants to pull Romania out of NATO. When we left, we were not part of NATO, right? In 2008 is when the country joined NATO. And now this guy wants to pull us out, which means that we would be open season for Russia, since we're right there. And that's really, really scary. So,
what's your biggest fear right now?
I have a lot of...
It's a hard question.
Dictatorship, oppression, corporate greed completely taking over, our economy completely failing, and us being forcefully switched over to a cryptocurrency, scared about climate change. If these right-wing leaders want to pull us out of the Paris Agreement, want us to just, not believe in climate change like this party seems to push, that's really scary for the next generations. That I'm scared for humanity. Like, I'm really scared for humanity as a whole. I'm obviously preaching to the choir when I say that the parallels between this and what happened in Germany after the pandemic are very similar.
Yeah, it is really scary.
I've always had an innate want to fight for justice ever since I was a little girl. Like, my first kind of experience with racism, I guess, was when I was little and I saw gypsies, that were technically not, there is a lot of stigma, right? And there's a lot of complex issues there that I can't really get into too much right now. But it was my first experience, and I remember that like clear in my mind from when I was 3 or 4 years old, of why are these people getting treated so badly and living on the streets, and why are we judging them so badly? Like, I get it. They do steal from people. They have done that. But why?
Yeah.
That's the lot of complexities. But I don't know. I have that as like my first memory of seeing injustice. And then I guess my second memory after that, from when I was really little, is seeing all of the stray dogs and cats and like really hurt animals in my country. And that just, I just didn't get it. I was like, why are we not taking care of them? Why are we not helping them? Why are we letting this happen? And growing up, I've always been that way. I just looked at injustice and went, how can we do this? It was never something I could comprehend. Why should we treat somebody differently than we treat ourselves? Why should we not care about our neighbor? Like when it comes to the whole carbon tax thing, right? The opposition of the carbon tax just basically says it makes things cost more for me. Therefore, I don't care about future generations. And I get that the carbon tax is not like the end all be all solve climate change. It's just one small part of it. But when you break it down economically, it's barely making an impact on people.
You're right.
It's really not.
Nerdy, you're 100% right. Nerdy, do you have any questions?
No, I guess my only question right now is not related to what you were saying, but do we know who Canadian Resistors is? Because they're being combative in the comments towards me, and I don't know if they're friendly or not.
He looks like
I do not know them.
I know Canadian Resistors.
Okay.
Are they friendly?
They're just refusing to answer questions.
Yeah,
so I'm not wanting to have somebody up here if they're gonna have to, if I have to walk around walk around in circles with them. So
just answer the questions and then we can go on Canadian Resistors. So just it makes it a safer space for all of us. We appreciate that.
He told me to ask you, so you were being combative. But anyway, that was my only question, was that, because I've been trying to get information out of him.
It's good stuff. Yeah, they're doing some good work. They're doing good work. Yeah.
So Canadian Resistors, can I just emphasize that, we just want direct answers to questions, not ask the host, not go look at my page. Just tell me that you're a friendly. That's all you have to say to me. Like, because otherwise it doesn't make us want to bring you up. It's not a good first impression of you. So,
I think
all
he
right.
was probably
Okay.
just going like, "Hey, ask the host or ask me for validation so that I could."
Yeah,
I don't think it.
but I mean, it's
don't
good that
think
you asked me a question,
combative.
because I wasn't going to interrupt your conversation to ask that, but you stopped and asked me the question, so I figured that's a good time to
Yeah.
ask a question. Anyway,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you. So you're thinking about all these things. You've left this life behind, and now you're in it, and your family's living it. What are some of the things that come to mind right now that we can start doing?
Obviously,
Like,
education, 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 education. I'm going to push that till, the day I'm not here anymore, because what we're seeing right now all over the world is a lack of education. And I think social media is big time at fault for that. Social media has made it so that people don't really have to digest large pieces of information anymore, right? Everybody
yeah.
can go get a meme or a snippet and go, oh, I know what I'm talking about now. So that's a big problem, right? Podcasts have they're great. Podcasts are great. I don't think everybody listens to podcasts, but even that, like, it's kind of taken over books. Like, people don't really read books on a subject anymore. They just go, what's a 20-minute podcast? I can get a gist summary version of something. And we're not going to be able to properly process what's going on around us if we're only taking in tiny little snippets of information without having context. I think our education system in high school needs to change, big time. Everything that we're teaching in high school is kind of super outdated. Like, I was having a talk with Zojin earlier today at lunch, and we were talking about how, like, math and science, of course, are important, but nowadays we have an encyclopedia at our fingertips. Nobody's really doing calculus anymore for their jobs. So the main subjects, in my perspective, for high school should be how the economy works, finance, how does that work? How does the government work?
That's that piece, though. So I'm just going to interject a little, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. That's the government getting into education.
Yes.
And, so I was in education in Alberta. I had the privilege of being in the classroom for 25 years. If you pick up a textbook in grade 3 in the Aboriginal education, it's going to tell you that the priests, the Catholic, no, I'm saying them wrong. What is it? The Indigenous children and the Catholic priests ran through the hills holding each other's hands to the school. That is in the textbooks for grade 3 in Alberta. That, like, as we speak at this very moment. And that's because the government's able to come in and do that to education. And we need to have it in a way that education across Canada is held in such a safe space that no politician can touch it.
100%. And it should really be decided by the experts.
Scholars.
Not government officials.
It's terrifying that Danielle Smith,
Oh my God.
Maple Mega, is allowed to do Maple Mega math. It never balances. 2 + 2 = 4, not 3.
She's also trying to bring Catholic books back into public schools.
Oh, real native, you're right, but I gotta put you on mute. I'm sorry, we're having this conversation with Frontline Feminist, but we're gonna bring you up soon. So back to education, 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 and then what else?
Trying to convince people that don't vote that it's really important for them to vote, especially in this election. We here all know that voter turnout in Canada is terrible, like absolutely terrible. People here just don't vote. And I see it in my own, everyday communities. When I talk to people, like, I teach yoga. So, sometimes I'll talk to my students about these things, very passively, of course. Don't want to start too much. But I get this whole I don't vote thing all the time. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. It doesn't matter. I don't bother. My life will be fine.
I ran into 2 people that didn't vote. Sorry, Nerdy, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, but if every single one of those people who said that actually voted, it would make a huge difference.
Massive.
Totally.
Massive.
Yeah.
Doug Ford
like,
won in Ontario with what, like 18%? Yeah.
Well,
So
and
that's
even look at Danielle Smith here, right? She didn't win with half of the population, like half of the voting population. She won with
she
half of the
set the
people, like
table.
over half of the people that voted. That's it.
And they
Yeah.
had to pay for a seat. They had to pay a large amount for a dinner ticket, and they had to be willing to vote in her favor. I used to be a conservative, so I've kept my membership going in Alberta, even though I don't live there. So I can kind of see what the UCP is up to. And I got a questionnaire sent to me about 3 months before this was set. And I think it was set to see who they would invite to that meeting. So if you didn't score in a certain way, you were not going to get an invite to that meeting.
Okay.
And that's how she got voted in. You had to be Fox News type.
Hey, let's not forget that Nova Scotia just had an election during a Canada Post strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Not cool.
but not cool. Good that the NDP is in a powerful position there. Still, I'm shocked that Tim's still there. But he paid the dirty dog, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got education. We got working on our youth, right? We've got to talk about voting and we've got to push that out. What else do you think?
So this is actually the part that can be more of an open discussion between us, because up until recently,
Okay, wait, should we leave that to the end?
I guess we can maybe touch on it now and then touch on it later when we get people to join
Okay.
in. But I guess up until recently, I always thought that if we treat our opposition with kindness, it'll break through some of them, right? They might be like, hey, this person isn't just paid by the liberals and spreading misinformation. They might actually go like, no, this person looks like they actually might care about me. But after the election, it's been hard. I still try to approach some people with kindness, but some comments I have a hard time doing that. I'm usually quite direct. Not necessarily mean, but direct. So trying to find that balance, trying to understand if there's a potential here to work with kindness. Is this person actually going to give me kindness back, even if we don't agree? Or is this person going to immediately go to insults and hate? And trying to really figure that out. Because I've had experiences on this app with people that at first were very combative, to at least come to a point where we can find some sort of agreement. Like I had this experience with one girl who got really upset with me for talking about the fact that, I support us sending money to Ukraine. And she was very combative at first. And we were able to open up a conversation. She had no idea about the Budapest Memorandum. We were able to talk about it. I found out she had relatives in Eastern Europe. I had relatives in Eastern Europe. We were able to find a common ground. We both don't want those people to suffer. And after we talked for about half an hour, she finally went, wow, I learned so much from you. I actually might change my mind a little bit now. I'll think more about it. And we agreed that we could be nice to each other. And it was a really beautiful experience.
I love that.
Doesn't happen often. Doesn't happen often. But it happened. But it happened.
I had a little bit of the same experience last week where, a homeless encampment down the road. We got a lot of snow out here. Their tents broke, they couldn't get out. It was really bad. And one of the ladies in town put up something on Facebook saying, does anybody have shovels? Can they get a plow out there?
Oh, I think you cut out a little bit.
Oh,
right. But they all have common ground.
Oh, there we go.
They all have common ground.
You froze for a second.
Yeah, you froze for a second. We missed the last.
You're good now.
45 seconds.
Okay. So all of these people got together, dag out the homeless encampment. We all have common ground. And no. But he
Mrs.
talked
Radical.
about politics. And I'm not saying that
You're cutting out a lot.
You're
You have
cutting out
Maple
really
Mega
badly.
Wi-Fi.
there's a time.
Sorry.
You're running on Maple Mega Wi-Fi right now. You're cutting in and out all the time. We heard like every fifth word. Yeah, you have one bar. I'm gonna while she's fixing that, I'm gonna ask you a question because you're talking about like focusing on the opposition and like and then like talking kind to them and stuff like that, right? I guess my only thing, I totally agree with talking kind to everybody, like about everything, because I really feel like as soon as you get combative with anybody, their mind is going to be closed off to you completely, right? So when you're talking like I was running a live before and somebody was talking about how as soon as somebody mentions that they're Christian or that they're conservative, the people on the left would be like, ugh, right away, and then it just like it really sours the entire conversation. So my thing would be like, aside from speaking to like opposition about that, because honestly, I think a lot of the people who are opposition are going to be opposition no matter what. It's very rare that you're going to change those people's minds, but it's like, I think it would be more beneficial for us to be working on the undecided and the apathetic. You know what I mean? Like those ones are the ones because they are maybe a little bit more open to the education and not so closed off and set in their conservative ways.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that what I was kind of saying is that no matter what, we're going to have to deal with these people, especially for putting ourselves out there and trying to educate, right? We're going to have them come into our comments. And what I don't want to do personally, I know a lot of people will just block them, not let them speak on their page, but I want to actually show them that I don't want to be in an echo chamber. If they can prove me wrong, I want to have that discussion. I want to see where it takes me. I want to give them the chance to realize, like, this is not an echo chamber. This is a place where you can tell me that I'm wrong. I just need you to prove it to me.
Yeah, I think too, coming from a place where you're not calling people uneducated is something we have to work on.
Yeah.
And I know I have to do that too.
It would be more,
we're not going to get anywhere by insulting each other.
Uninformed, because they don't have that information.
Why does uneducated have to be an insult? Because it's not an insult. There is a difference between someone who's gone to school and educated themselves and someone who hasn't. I mean, look at the election map for the United States. If you look at just educated voters, that whole thing is blue. If you look at
there's a part of me that really agrees with you. But there's also, I saw a really neat graphic after the election, and it showed how Elon Musk had routed the traffic in the United States. And so basically, all the leftists were getting sent bots. And those bots were meant to just argue and keep people tied up in arguments back and forth. Yeah. And then the misinformation was sent to the right. So, you know, and then somebody comes in with information that they really think like this is real news. I really believe this. I heard it myself. And then they come in and they want to tell you they've got their Chicken Little, you know, they want to tell the world everything because I have that problem too. And they come to tell you and you're like, yeah, misinformation. Go educate yourself. Check your sources out. Da-da-da-da-da. You're going to make them feel like crap. And they're not going to listen to you.
Yeah, and I think like uninformed is different than uneducated, right? Because like uneducated, sometimes depending on where they are, they can't help the education that they've been given, right? So if you look at like down in the States, even if you look at it in provincially here, the conservative provinces and the conservative states tend to have lower education scores and systems than the liberal and NDP and Democratic like areas, right? Because they actually care about the education of the people that are there. Whereas like the conservatives always want to drag everybody down and make it so they're not informed, because the less informed they are, or the less educated they are, the easier it is to manipulate them with false information because they think that that's true and they don't know any better.
100%. And I mean, we know that. We know that, you know, dictators have always loved the uneducated because they are easy to manipulate. Like, that's just fact.
I think that's the difference between uneducated and uninformed, though, right?
Well, yes. On some level, you're correct, right? Like a lot of these people that are uninformed don't really think about teaching themselves. But that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that we do have a world right now where you can access education from your phone for
And
free.
that's that part, though,
All
of
the
if you
time.
can get to a middle ground where you can have conversation, we can start sharing that, I'm getting this information and you're getting this information. Like, I work in an office where I understand that most people don't agree with my political persuade, like where I stand. So I've been really working hard on knowing that I try to put it into perspective. So the story I tell myself about some of those people are, they get misinformation, and I know that, and I just have to remember that they're still good people because they're doing the same kind of work I'm doing. And nobody really signs up to do the kind of work that I'm doing if you're not inherently have something decent about you, or that you wanted to do something decent. It's not a glorifying job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's who I get through the day with, those people. And I keep trying to look for all of those good spots, and I refuse to talk politics with them because I can't change their minds, and I won't.
Yeah. 100%. And also there's, I don't know where you guys find yourselves, but I know I'm neurodivergent. I've been diagnosed that I'm neurodivergent. I'm a high functioning ADHD brain. And so these types of brains, as I've seen a lot throughout, being in these political spaces, a lot of neurodivergent people really like politics, because we have the type of brain where if we see a little bit of information, our brain's like, I don't know, can I trust that? I need to go research like 50 other articles to see if I'm right or not. And we have a really hard time saying things out loud that we're unsure about. Yeah. But neurotypical brains, I feel, don't really have that, because they don't have that overthinking part in their brains that are constantly like, oh, I'm doubting myself. So I think that's, that's a little part of it too. And I have to remind myself that when I'm dealing with a neurotypical brain, they're not going to be able to see things the way that I see. And, right. When I first learned about myself, I actually had a mind-blowing realization that not everyone thinks like me. So I need to be more mindful of that 100%. And I don't know how long we're into the half an hour, but if I can have the opportunity to say one more thing before we open it up, when we're talking about what we can do. One of the big things that I think is really important is how we're educating and talking to young men specifically. Because I think young men have really been influenced by people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate. And these guys are big names, right? I mean, most of these young guys get their information strictly from these influencers, not even from the news, not even from Donald Trump's ex. They get it directly from these influencers. And I do find that there's not a lot of strong male influencers on our side. Like ones that would appeal to these guys. And I get that it's very hard to appeal to them, but they want to see a successful man who's strong. And there are a lot of liberal Democrat men that are like this, but they like to stay out of the limelight. And I think
I'm thinking about Sojin, and I'm thinking about the Real Native, and Perry in the box, and there's probably somebody I've forgotten. We have a lot of really strong men. We just need to get more, because you're right.
I think that we just need to find a different appeal, though, right? Like, there are a lot of good men talking about this. There are tons, right? But they don't appeal to those young guys. So I don't know how to bridge that gap, but I feel like that's really, really, really important. There was a lot more young male voters for Donald Trump than there was women.
I think it's that community piece. That was another thing I took away from when I left church, was they're very organized. They're very mindful. They're very organized. And for 10 years, I remember them having men's group and having breakfast and bacon, you know, because men like bacon, you know, and we all wear beards and and they'd all show up together in their plaids and their hairy. And it was this big, strong, we're tough men, we're bald, we do, you know what I mean? And our men need to come together and show that piece of community. I like the way you pointed that out.
Yeah. I think it's kind of their responsibility that they really need to take, because us as women can't do it. But they need to create spaces that are appealing to young men and educate them.
Bacon. Nerdy,
Bacon.
do you have anything you want to share before we open it up?
Me?
No, I lost my point.
Oh,
I forgot to write it down and I lost it. But yeah, that's the neurospice. So I always have to have a notepad by me all the time so I can write down everything and not forget a single thing that I
literally do the same thing.
Yes. I have like 5 different notepads around my desk. So yes. You're ADHD, I'm ADHD. So
if you saw my house, it's literally, I've got Post-it notes everywhere.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just dyslexic with ADD. I totally fall into that.
I guess. What I did put in the comments actually when you were mentioning that is that people who are neurodivergent usually have more of a sense of justice as well too, right? In a sense of of knowing what's right or wrong and knowing what consequences should happen with those things. And so like when we see injustice happening, we get more upset about it than other people do because we're like, there should be consequences for this. So when we see somebody like, 45, who's going to be 47, getting into office after all the things he's done and all of his cabinet members that he's choosing, that in our minds, there's zero sense making there at all, right? Like it kind of like our minds get completely blown by that whole fact because we just don't understand that.
100%. And I've talked to a lot of my, neurodivergent community, and they're all saying the same thing. They're like, we're suffering more right now than the neurotypicals because we see patterns that they just don't see yet. Hopefully they will one day.
So this is a time where the beavers get to pull back, and part of being a beaver is creating community and building pathways. So we're opening up and we're going to mute our mics.
Oh, God.
One at a time. If you guys do want to put your hands up maybe in the chat, and then we can kind of like, go through it. So it's not a people talking over each other.
Sorry.
I think the real Canadian had something to, the real native had something to say first. Are you available?
No, I'll let Smarshy go first. You got her hand up.
Okay. There's so much I want to say on what was touched on with neurospicy. And I'm trying to look at these people and be like, okay, how can I talk to them? And how can I not make them understand, but how can I get them to understand my point of view? You can't make someone do something that they don't want to do. And that's what I had to learn the hardest way was not everyone's going to agree with me at one point or the other. It's just not. But I use simple solutions, and I talk to these people, and it breaks my heart because everyone's like, well, no, that's not true. And then I'm like, okay, well, what's your source? And they'll look it up, and they're like, hey, this is not like a credible source. And they're like, well, that's the only source I could find. I'm like, okay, so let's kind of backtrack. I don't know how many times I've been called a liberal or a Democrat, and I'm sitting there, and it mind baffles me. Like, how as a person like myself who's neurospicy, talk to people in a way where I can understand where they're coming from and we can kind of find a common ground. That's what I want to know. Oh, and I put a comment in the thing that said we need the men that we know that are decent human beings. We need them to start groups where they center men, even our young men in the younger generation. Center them, have lives with them. Don't invite any women, have women sit in the comments or whatever. But I think that would be a great start.
Yeah, I was just when you brought up the thing about education with Danielle Smith and everything, I right away jumped to the the book she's trying to bring in into the public schools, which is almost like being a dictator because she's trying to control what the students are learning, and she wants them to learn what she wants them to learn. And it's taking the educational system back 100 years to the days of the residential school, where they controlled what the students wanted to learn. Um, the other thing is that's going to lead to things like catechism classes, which were removed back in, I believe it was the 1980s. Too late for me to get, you know, I had to go through those classes, and let me tell you, Sister Margaret was brutal. But that's where that is headed if we don't do something about education with regards to our current premier. That's where I see her taking it.
May I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just for an example, I've been trying new tactics lately, and I went into this obscure live, and he brought me up into the box, and there was a gentleman up in the box talking about how he just decided to go conservative. So very respectfully and gently, I asked him why. And with everything that he gave me, I gently gave him back, okay, this is why I don't necessarily agree, or the benefits, or whatever. By the end of that live, I'm pretty certain I had that gentleman's mind changed. I hope I did. I'm pretty sure I did. But I thought one person at a time. If that's how it's going to be, one person at a time, that's better than nothing. What do you think?
I don't know who that was geared towards.
No, it was geared toward Frontline, sorry.
There we go. Sorry, it took me for. Sometimes a little mute button doesn't like my finger. I think that whatever works, like whatever works, is always great. I get a little bit scared sometimes of going into those obscure lives. Like you, I think you're a little bit more brave than I am. When I see a panel of 5, 6 conservatives, I get a little scared. Not gonna lie. I know what they're like, and it's hard. So good on you for doing that, first of all. Second of all, hey, I'll give it a shot, right? I'll give it a shot. If it's something that works, then we got to do whatever we can.
Well, if it's one person or 10 people, it's a move forward. The other thing I wanted to ask, though, is what do you think our best option is in moving forward?
I mean, kind of what I already brought up, right? Try to educate as much as possible in your own communities. Whenever anybody wants to listen to you, like I do it especially with young women, because they don't really know what's going on in government, but they know that they care about their freedoms. And that goes really well usually. I tend to have a lot of success with young women. So talking to your communities, talking to your neighbors. I've been finding, NDP or Liberal supporting neighbors now in my building, and I've created friendships with them, which is really cool. Sometimes I even bring it up with random people in the elevator if the discussion sways that way. Encouraging men to start men's groups to talk about this stuff, I think is super, super important. Me as a woman, unfortunately, not a lot of men are going to take me seriously. Like, I have to be brutally honest. The men that take me seriously are already on our side, for the most part. I don't want to generalize, but when we're talking about strategies, I have to go based off statistics. And because I'm a woman, men look at me and they don't really take me seriously. So I think that as women, we have a better chance with other women. And I think that men really need to start groups for men in order to really tackle this issue. Other than that, yeah, just educate, try to be kind. If somebody's not super aggressive towards you, always try kindness until it doesn't work. And yeah, that's kind of all I got. I wish I had more. The other thing that I could add, honestly, that I was thinking about today, especially, is the right has a lot of money. They have way more financial support than we do. We're like the grassroots movement. We're starting from nothing. All of us are doing this in our own free time, not getting paid for it. I mean, I've taken 3 hours to do research for one tiny little 8-minute video. That's not time I get paid. So figuring out ways to get funded for what we do, even if it's a little bit, I think would really, really help. I think a lot of people get burnt out from doing this for free for so long. That's why I think the comments of how much do you get paid by the Liberals hurt me the most, because I'm like, I don't get a single cent for doing this. So I think us finding a way to get more donations or get more support is going to be really important, because as I said, the right, they do get paid for influencing the way they do. There's millions of dollars that have poured into social media influencing for the right, and we don't really have much. So, but I think politicians are waking up to that. Like the NDP met up with Zojin today to do some videos. And so he's going to be able to put that on his public page, which is amazing, right? So politicians do need to work with us too. Like we really need to get them to get on board and to realize that many of the voting decisions of today start in social media spaces.
So just adding to that, Under the Desk News actually did they had a breakdown of where people got their news on the US election. 60% of people who voted for Harris got their news from TikTok sources, like TikTok news sources and people talking about it on TikTok and stuff like that, right? And then you looked at, I think it was YouTube was for YouTube and Facebook, I think it was either 40 to 80%, I think of it was conservatives. That's where they got their news from, was from the other ones where anyway, it was like not credible news sources for the most part.
Yeah, Facebook was found to have the highest amount of misinformation and propaganda on it than all of the other social media sites. Facebook turned out to be the worst.
Which is why I haven't been on there for 2 years. So
I don't really ever use Facebook outside of Messenger, so I can message friends and work related stuff.
I literally just deactivated my account yesterday. So Canadian Resistance was next to speak.
Hey guys, thanks for having me up on stage. By the way, I didn't feel like I was being aggressive or non-compliant to your questions. I was just being cute. Maybe it didn't come across.
I didn't really say non-compliant, but it's just when you're saying "let me up," that is like demanding. Well, so that's where it goes with that.
Well, here's the thing, and I think part of this is going to go along with what Frontline Feminist was saying, in that I am the Joe Rogan, the masculine male, the one that is going to confront the other side in terms of, being that aggressive. I mean, I've been fighting Maple MAGA and MAGA for the last 2 years on Twitter and everything else. So perhaps my style is a little bit more aggressive than most would be accustomed to. But having said that, the one thing I wanted to emphasize for everybody listening is that I think we need to broaden our horizons a little bit. In that, I think if what we learned from the Kamala Harris campaign is that we need to focus more on the whole as to the singular, which is to say that, of course, our values are consistent with protecting the rights of every single person, all marginalized communities. We want to make sure that everybody has a voice. We want to make sure that everybody has a place to be able to stand in our tent. But at the same time, we need to be able to have a message that resonates with those who may not necessarily agree with the 2 or 3% of the people with which we're representing in our tent, right? And I think that's where the message kind of gets lost, is that we focus too much on the fringe elements and we get lost in the bigger tent issues. So for me, and I know I've spoken with Frontline on this in our DMs, is that we need to really create a resistance. We really need to amplify our message to make people realize that this is about the greater of Canadianism, right? It's not about the identity politics that the right wing, that the fringe elements of the alt-right will kind of paint us as being radical leftists, or we only care about like crazy left-wing ideologies. And no, we care about everybody. We love all Canadians, right? And it's like, unfortunately, we see a lot of Canadians that are being radicalized, right? They're being subjected and they're being fall victim, right, to these propagandists and these people that are spreading these lies, right? And they're just believing in this because they're frustrated, they're angry, they don't know what to do. Inflation is high, they can't afford groceries, they get, right? And so what do people generally do when they become frustrated? They want change. And they don't care if it doesn't matter, just in the United States, right? They don't care, oh, we want Donald Trump, that's going to be change. And then it's going to be the worst for them. Right? Because they're not really thinking in a cohesive way. They're listening to all this propaganda, and Canada specifically, you know, our Canadian media is owned by 80% of American Republicans, hedge funds in the United States. So they've been shaping the narrative, right, in Canadian politics, where we don't really hear liberal voices. You know, every time you hear a politician say, oh, the liberal media is protecting Justin Trudeau, that's a bunch of bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just not true. They're gaslighting us, right?
Nuts.
Yeah. So for us, I think we need our voices to be loud and clear. And like, for instance, I'll give you a perfect example. Today I was on X, and do you guys remember the show Kenny and Spenny?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was talking to Spenny, and he's an Israeli, and he is obviously upset by all these protests and everything else that are going on in Montreal and Toronto. And he's like, oh, fuck Justin Trudeau, man. He's letting this. And I'm like, dude, this is part of the problem. You are allowing these agitators, these professional propagandists, to create divisiveness in your brain, so that automatically you're blaming our government and you're creating this this division. Whereas if you stood back and you really concentrated on what was happening and all of the forces that are working against us, you might be able to realize that, yes, of course, there are some people that are anti-Semites. There are some people that are causing problems that are obviously unacceptable and they should be held accountable to the law. But there are also a bunch of people that are doing it on purpose to create division, so that those of us who believe in our liberal democracy aren't able to reach out to those who may be persuadable, who may be amenable to being told that, hey, you know what, dude, maybe you're falling victim to this bullshit. Like, come on, bro, let me kind of bring you back into the fold. right? But they are putting so much pressure on folks that they are unable to be receptive to that message. And so for me, myself, I am uber aggressive. I am taking on every goddamn troll that's in every X comment. I am pushing back against every Russian propagandist. I am the guy that's out there using every 4-letter curse word and every goddamn insult that you could possibly imagine, because there also is a need for an element of that, right? Like, there needs to be some of us who can push back against the trucker convoys. There needs to be some of us that can push back against the people that don't believe in our democratic values and our democratic institutions. And so for that, I will say maybe that's why I was a little bit too aggressive.
You're good. I gave you a follow.
There is a place for us.
But I was gonna say there is a place for that, because some guys, I mean, unfortunately, just, I've been around men my entire life. I was a tomboy. I've worked in male fields. Some men will only respond to that kind of aggression.
Yeah, and the only other point I'll make, and I'll wrap it up here, I'll land on this, is that currently I'm living in Italy, so I've had an opportunity to see how Russian propaganda, and listen, according to parliamentary testimony, 80% of all misinformation and disinformation in the world is propagated by Russia. 80% of it in Europe, right? 100%. And 60% of it across the globe. And so I've seen how it's affected Giorgia Meloni here in Italy, and how Elon Musk has interfered in the politics here in Italy, and how he involves himself in Canada. And all I'll say is that for me, I'm uber aggressive because I feel like we are in very dangerous times. There can't be this moment for pussyfooting and tap dancing around the edges, because I don't feel like we have time for that, quite frankly.
Yeah. So 2 things to what you said. You were talking about finding the not focusing so much on the little things that we're all worrying about in our different groups and stuff like that. It's funny because we talked about this a couple times, and I actually made this Venn diagram last week where these are all the different groups and all the things, and this is like the one thing right here that is our common ground, and that's what we all need to focus on, right? Is like that one piece right there that gets us all together, that are on the left, because we all do focus. Like, if you look at every single marginalized community and stuff, we all focus on the things that we care about, but we need to find that one thing that glues us all together and melts us all together, right? And then 100%. The other thing, what was the other thing that you mentioned? During the U.S. campaign, they were talking, Michelle Obama kept on talking about when they go low, we go high. All the Americans are done with that now. I hang out in a lot of American political debate spaces, and they're all like, no, when they go low, we go low now. And we're hitting them exactly where they hit us all the time. And so they're giving it back exactly what they were given the whole time, right? And now you get the right who are complaining and crying about this. It's like, you treated us this way for how many years? And now we're giving you the same thing back, but it's a big deal now. So
yeah, we literally have no choice, because the rise of Donald Trump has brought in this element of disrespectful politic and name calling and gross, right? Yes. Just the worst of the worst, right? And so we literally, and Pierre Poilievre is following in his footsteps. So we literally have no choice. If you look at the landscape, in that Donald Trump can be the most vile and racist and disgusting human being, and he can be elected as president of the United States after an insurrection against the government and all the assaults on women and all the bullshit that he has done, then obviously we need to learn the lesson that we need to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of calling people out on their shit and holding Pierre Poilievre accountable for all of the shitty things that he's done in this country. And the time for being a nice guy is over. It's just over, unless we want to lose. And I'm not down for that.
Yeah.
I feel you.
MS Lotus is next after, unless you can respond, and then MS Lotus is next.
Oh,
did you want to respond,
somebody gonna
Frontline?
respond?
Yeah, I didn't know
Me?
Frontline wanted to say something. Yeah, did you want to say anything to that?
I did. I said, yeah. I mean, you're right. I mostly agree with that. I think most people are, we kind of have to be tough. I think there's some people that we do need to coddle a little bit, but that's what I was saying earlier. It really takes like a level of intuition to figure out who might actually listen to you if you're nice. But again, I think that a lot of the time it ends up, in my experience, it's women. So.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I missed, hi everyone, nice to see you all. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the thing. I was busy doing some other things, but I'm picking up that we're talking about how to talk to people or how to get our point across to them. Is that what we're kind of talking about here? Yeah. So
Yeah.
my approach is not so much to change the mind of the person I'm interacting with. I have a background in sales, and I also have a lot of years in 12-step fellowship for recovery. And I've worked with a lot of people who didn't want to hear the things I had to say. And what you do what I learned to do in those situations, like what you learn to do is to plant seeds. And so that's how you change confirmational bias and cognitive dissonance, is by slowly picking apart their belief system and giving them shaking up their belief system with a credible alternative. And so, like, if you notice, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll point out the hypocrisy. I'll take a lot of time. I'll take what they've said. I'll go and get the research, and I will point out the hypocrisy and the fallacy in their line of thought. Not because I'm trying to change their opinion, but because somebody else who's going to come and watch that video, that's their buddy who thinks that they're going to pile on, will watch that video and go, oh, I didn't think of it like that. Oh, that doesn't make me feel good inside. That makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't like that. And then when they hear somebody else say the same thing again, they're going to go, oh, wait a minute, that B that I just talked to or just heard, she said that. Now this person is saying that. Maybe there's something to this. And it's not quick. It's not a quick way of doing things, but and the other thing with a sales background is you have to focus in on what matters to them and make it beneficial for them to hear what you have to say. So that's how I kind of approach things. It's never about changing the mind of the person that I'm going after. It's about all the seeds I can plant in the minds of all the other people that are watching what I have to say. And when I approach it like that, I don't care about the outcome of that one particular interaction, but I know that there's people out there that are on the fence that are listening to what I'm saying and going, hey, maybe there's something to this. Maybe what I'm thinking over here is wrong. Maybe there's something to this. Like we're seeing with the tariffs, right, down in the States. Nobody understood those tariffs. And now, and you can, the most powerful video I watched was Walter Matthiessen.
Yes.
He was talking to this guy who sold t-shirts. And he was interviewing him outside of a Trump rally right before the election. You saw it, right? Where he's talking to him, and he's like, okay, so Trump's going to put tariffs and that's going to save me money. And Walter's like, okay, wait a minute. And then he brought in Jolly Ginger to explain it to the guy, right? And you could see in real time that guy going, oh shit, oh no, right? Like I've been had. And that's what changes people's minds, I think, the most, is that you can, one thing you really learn when you go into recovery is that you cannot control how anybody else thinks, really. Like you cannot make somebody think something. You can't. I mean, yes, there's propaganda and all that kind of stuff, but you personally cannot control another person, like how they interpret information. All you can do is present the information and see and let the chips fall where they may. And sometimes people will pick it up and sometimes they won't. But the idea is that once you start planting seeds, once enough seeds are planted, that's where you change people's minds. And I think that us continuing to just debunk misinformation, debunk things, present alternatives, make cracks in their arguments, show the hypocrisy, show the fallacy of the information that they've got. And for me, like if I'm arguing with a troll and I've presented them with a bunch of information that they can't refute, and they've gotten to a point where they don't have the knowledge to continue the conversation and they start insulting me or they just leave, I take that as a win, because they're so uncomfortable with what I've had to say to them, and it has shook their internal dialogue so much that they don't want to talk to me anymore.
Hey, I was able to get a conservative to actually look up the conservative declaration policy. If you noticed in my videos, I was like, you know what? This guy won't change his mind, but at least he showed the fact that he finally went and downloaded it. Like, I know that he's going to have a hard time understanding and understanding how vague it is, because it literally looks like something that ChatGPT made in 30 minutes. Like, I'm kidding. I don't know if you guys have read through the conservative declaration policy. It's so bad.
It is so really bad. Yeah.
But maybe by reading it, he'll get to a point where he's like, this all sounds a little vague.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem too, is that they don't take anything below the surface, right? So when you hit them with a bunch of information that goes against their narrative, like what they've formulated in their head, it shakes them up. And they're like, wait a minute, and they may not still see it your way, but at least they're getting the information and they know what they're, like, so many people in the US did not know what they were voting for.
Yep.
Just like Brexit. They didn't know what they were voting for, right? It was exactly like Brexit. And, again, low information voters, lots of interference propaganda-wise, lots of confusion, lots of chaos, lots of poisoning the pot, and it failed. And they regretted it. The people who voted for Brexit regretted it deeply, And sometimes that's how people have to learn. And unfortunately, when you live in a society, they take you with them. But I think at this point, I think we're probably looking at a minority conservative government. That's kind of where I'm thinking it's going to go federally. I know. And the other thing, I always tell people is get involved on the street. Like, get out and get involved, right?
I think we need to stop taking guesses, though, about what the government's going to look like until we've actually got into an election.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, hard on me to hear something like that people have just resigned themselves.
Oh, no, it's not a resign. It's just,
It's like, come on, we haven't even started the fight.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I'm also, at heart, I'm a pragmatist. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really pragmatic, and I see the writing on the wall.
The writing was on the wall with the BC election. We barely squeaked through, but we did
barely squeak through. We did barely squeak through.
And I still can't believe it, guys. I still can't believe it. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.
Well, but you know what? It would have been a very different election had he called it in the spring. It would have been a very different election. True. And actually, a lot of because I knocked doors for the NDP.
You did it, and you did a really good job. I worked in the federal election.
Yeah.
The last federal election, and I think that this is something like one of the things I recognize closely is that we all kind of took a break from politics this past year. Kind of let our guards down, didn't push as many political videos. People got locked up in their own dramas on lives and things like that. I'd really love to see people just become more focused, like that Venn diagram that Nerdy showed us, you know, like we're all over the place. But if we could just like focus in here on this really important piece, because I think that's what took it home for BC, is when we stopped with the petty and we focused in. You know, on those bot comments I was getting, I stopped using myself and I started picking up all my favorite creators and their my favorite clear and concise responses. And that's how I was hitting those bots back, was with really clear information.
Yeah. I don't actually get involved with that very much. Like if I'm actually 100% sure that it's a bot, I just delete the comment and block them. I don't actually even get into that. The people that I do reply videos to, it's usually because I think somebody else in the audience will learn from it, or that they are actually a real person. Like the other day, I got into it with this guy from, and it turned out he was from Winnipeg, but other people in the comments section kept calling him a bot, right? And I was like, no, you know what? I think this is a Canadian. And that's the thing that we have to be very careful on the left, is dehumanizing these people by calling them bots.
I know.
Right?
I
Because
don't
they're
ever call
not.
bots bots, even when they're bots, for that reason.
They're
For
not.
that reason.
There's a lot of Canadians on here that, you know, people forget. Like, we are not a highly educated country. People forget. Like, my grandmother had a grade 4 education. My dad had a high school, barely graduated high school.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Women in
Murphy was next, actually.
Oh,
Murphy's
sorry,
been up here
Murphy.
for a little bit. Yeah, Murphy's an American friend. Just had a really quick question to ask. Because she couldn't write it in the comments, so she wanted to come up here and ask it.
So I'm in the States, and someone had mentioned about residential schools here. Residential school, I know it's off the topic, but residential schools are so, like, if you're disabled and you can't, the school can't provide for you, you get put in a residential school. What's the difference between that and the residential schools you guys talk about?
Oh dear, that's a long one.
So they might be called residential schools where you are, but there were other residential schools that you also had in the United States that they basically, essentially what the gist of it was, actually, if anybody wants to come up and explain that would be fantastic. That's part of that community, because I really don't like.
If anybody wants to come up,
The ones that were the same as the residential schools up here were called Indian boarding schools down in the States.
Okay.
Here
Treaty
in
6 is up here.
Canada, they took Indigenous children without their permission. They abducted them. I'm going to stop now and let Treaty.
I brought Treaty 6 up.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on.
Hey, Trudy.
So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I don't really know a lot about the United States, but from what I understand, from what I know, the Indigenous schools there were called boarding schools. More than here, it was specifically residential schools, which were run by the church in coordination with the government, both Catholic, Anglican Church, Lutheran churches. I don't know for sure how it all happened in the United States, but here was the big push to, basically educate the Indian out of the child and assimilate, because, for the betterment of so-called betterment of the Indians, but also to save the cost. I really do believe like one of the things that's different between the United States and here is the way that treaties have been upheld in Canada. And a lot of the issues with trying to assimilate and enfranchise Indigenous people in this country was to try to get away from the treaty obligations. So the more assimilated First Nation people would become, the more active they are in society. You couldn't get past a grade 9 education without giving up your Indian status. You couldn't hire a lawyer. There were times too, like when you weren't able to leave the reserves. And if you wanted to do those things, you had to disenfranchise and give up your status and become a citizen. And another thing I'm not sure about with this Americans is here we had in our Indian Act, if a First Nation woman married a non-Indigenous man, she would lose her status. And I really perceive that to be like a reward system. Now look at you, good little Indian woman, you married a white man. Whereas if a white woman or a non-Indigenous woman married a First Nation man, she would gain status. And kind of, when you think back to the times when this was happening, when they established the Indian Act in the late 1800s, it would have been like a reward, right? Now or I think for the non-Indigenous woman to marry a First Nation man would be like a punishment. Now you're an Indian and you have to live on the reserve and you're not allowed to leave any longer, and your children will all be Indians. Where it was the opposite for the woman who would marry off. And she would lose her status and all her children would not be status either. So good for you all. You all get to be part of society. And so I wished I was a little more well-versed in the way that the school system was developed in the States. But here it was really just designed to get rid of language, get rid of culture, and specifically to sever the connection that we have to land, because it was all about accessing our resources. Yeah. And this just gives, now that I'm up here, I feel like I need an opportunity to say, like, something that I'm really concerned about with the way the election turned out in the States is the relationship that Putin and Trump have. That whole conversation about the big water tap we have up here. There, I'm really afraid because, having ancestors that have already been colonized once, we don't want colonization to continue. And it still does happen to this day, which is that we're at the table now and actually party to some of the colonization because we're there having conversations about impact benefits agreements and economic inclusion and things like that. So we're really actively participating in ourselves. So I hope that helped answer a little bit and clarify things.
Thank you. It did. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Sorry if I rambled on.
We'll jump down now.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Murphy.
Thank you, Treaty Bird.
You're welcome.
And I agree with you, Treaty Bird. I'm also super scared of that exact same thing.
Yeah. Well, and if Pierre does get in, he'll just give them free pass to the resources. Because I don't know if you guys saw the report that just came out, or the reporting from the CBC and the Maple, I think it was, or the Tyee. The big push behind Axe the Tax are oil and gas lobbyists.
Yep.
And oil and gas lobbyists, miners, and forest industry lobbyists, all the lobbyists for all the resources, they're the ones that are funding the Conservative Party. They're the ones that are putting on these $2,000 a plate dinners for Pierre.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what annoys me about that is when everyone speaks about the cost related to doing resource development well, to protect Indigenous rights, to protect the environment, they're willing to pay those $2,000 a plate meals and pay those lobby fees and all of that, rather than take the time and effort and invest those funds into better things for all Canadians. Yeah. And it's so frustrating.
Well, they want they see Pierre as a road to rolling back all of the regulations, all the environment regulations. And John Rustad talked about that too in the BC election. He was also backed by oil and gas and the mining industry and the forestry industry. All the Conservatives are across the country.
Yeah. And when I first heard red tape reduction, I felt it was pointed at us as Indigenous people. We are the red tape because our rights are enshrined in the Constitution and there are legal obligations to ensure that they're being protected. And if they don't have to have regulatory approval for resource development, that takes out the duty to consult because there's no decision made by government to either authorize or not approve the projects, right? As long as there's an authority in place, then Indigenous rights have to be considered. Yeah. So this scares me. And I ask all of you to reach out to your First Nation friends and family if you have them, because our population do not vote.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to help motivate my people to vote.
Yeah, and listen to her. Get out and vote. Push people. Women Against Polyev. Please, do you have anything to share?
Just really briefly. Hi, Frontline Feminist. Francis here. I just wanted to say how much I really enjoy your the work that you do here. Sorry, I was supposed to be on vacation, and of course, I come down with COVID for the first time in 5 years. So sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, so dumb. I let my guard down. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. I just been listening to all the comments, and I agree with Resistance that I'm a bit on the more hardline end of things. What I do, I think this is such a complex issue. It runs through every area of our society, and how do we get the message out to people that guys like Polyev and his disgusting ilk are a threat to all of us. And so it is the social media, our mainstream media is unfortunately completely compromised. It does not help.
Yep.
I don't know if any of you saw yesterday in Parliament that the Conservatives were actually singing YMCA while somebody was talking. I guess it was the vote on whatever. And that's a Trump song that he plays at his rallies. That's the kind of stuff that they do. He was asked, Polyev, at his press conference, I believe yesterday or today, if he was going to Mar-a-Lago, and he just looked, he mumbled, and he walked away. So this guy is a threat to everything. He's a Russian dupe and a Republican dupe, and he's motivated by money and that sick ideology. So he's a threat to all of us. And so what I do, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, Frontline, because you're the guest here, and you're young, I'm not. I talk to every single person I know in my professional life, my personal life, my volunteer life, my community life about this situation. And I do it subtly to start and just see what the breadth is for the conversation. I've been now asked by friends to set up groups, in-person meeting groups, so we can just sit and talk about these issues and hopefully get more widespread dissemination of the information. So my question is, I really, feminists appreciate your clarity and the thoroughness of the information you provide in your videos, because we are in such dangerous times. And with what's happened in the States, that has magnified for me a millionfold. I think, like I said earlier, we need to tackle this from every level we can. And my question, yeah, because most people, and for me, I'm not interested in engaging with conservatives, people who are diehard conservatives. I just don't have that interest or that patience. And I think we're in a battle of rhetoric, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in talking to people who want to listen to facts and who are maybe apathetic or who don't vote, who are willing to look at something and get involved because they see the threat that it is to themselves and to their children in the long run and the short run. So my question for you as a young person is, and because you are so articulate, is, are you looking at, I don't know if this is personal, but are you looking at doing other like podcasts or looking at other social media platforms to get your message out, or partnering with some other young people? Because I think the messaging is so important.
I mean,
and thank you
it's really cool that you think I'm super young. I'm actually almost 40.
Well, I'm 62, so you're young.
I just mean I don't have that much of a reach with like the super young community. I tend to do a lot better with younger women than I do with men. But I have noticed that even people around my age, there's a lot of people that are completely apathetic. And my own personal experience of being really involved in politics is that the people in my close circles, which I barely even see anymore, don't want to hear anything about it. They look at it as it's negative, it's making us not have fun right now, and they just don't want to talk about it. After the election, I actually told a lot of the people in my life that, we're going to have to take a break because I'm not in the mood to go out and enjoy chai tea lattes right now. I'm in the mood to do something about what's happening in my country. And not even just in my country, but globally right now, if we're going to be brutally honest. And so it's hard. I do find it hard. I try to talk to as many people as possible. Like I said, sometimes at work, there's boundaries that I do need to not cross. But yeah, I mean, I was just telling Mrs. Radical earlier how I've been really thinking about getting a podcast going. I have some of the equipment ready. So that's probably something that I'm going to start with in the next couple of weeks. I really want to get on YouTube, but I find YouTube to be a little tedious. It takes a lot more editing. On TikTok, I can slap on a filter. I don't have to worry about doing my makeup, and boom, I can make a video. On YouTube, I find that, so I have a BBA and I know how to look at analysis of what works and what doesn't on certain platforms. And on YouTube, you do need to come across as a lot more professional if you want followers, if you want subscribers. Putting up the type of videos I put on TikTok on YouTube isn't really going to work. They have to be in a different format. So that's a little bit, that takes a lot of time, right? And I have to be able to make money to survive. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, is that I'm not funded to do any of this. So it's incredibly time consuming. Like, I've actually lowered my income in order to do this so that I can have the time to do it. When you said, I speak so clearly in my videos, well, I probably take sometimes 2 hours to put a video together. I make a bunch of notes, just so that I can make sure that the information's correct. And again, tedious, very tedious. So podcasting, yes. TikTok, yes. Instagram, I find it to be a very odd platform. Very odd platform, like very, very hard to actually build a following on Instagram. I feel like the algorithm is different and it really favors existing content creators that have a big following. Like, it's really hard for people to find you. So I'm not really going too hard on Instagram. I'll take posts from TikTok and I'll upload them there for, just in case type thing. If we hear that TikTok's going down, at least I can tell all my followers, hey guys, hop onto Instagram. I'll continue to do what I do here on there. But I don't find it to be a platform for actually getting the message out. And then, of course, there's Blue Sky, which is great, but it's all of us. So it's not getting the message to the people that need to hear it. It's just a nice space for us to be able to get information, talk to each other without all of the crazies that X used to have, or that has, sorry. I left Twitter the day that Elon bought it, so.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Radical. I want to go back to a point that was discussed a little bit earlier about, and I made a TikTok about it today, but we have to start looking at the Conservative Party and the Republican Party down in the States. They're nothing more than the political arm of the business community. Everything that they do is geared toward the business community. I mean, they are simply businesses' representation in government. And until we message that out to other people, I think the message is partly going to get lost. Because unless we can definitively lay that out for the right side, I don't think we're ever going to break through to them, because they are opposed to government. However, what we're seeing is simply a replacement government with replacement ideology that's geared toward business. And I think that's partly why we're losing so many people right now, is we need to be clearer about the message that we're actually delivering to the right side if we want them to listen.
I think that's really good. And I think even Canadian Resistors, when he was up here, he kind of echoed that a little bit, that we really need to get clear on our messaging, because just pointing the finger at them and going, you're uneducated and you're wrong, is not the message that's going to help us out right now. And we saw it, right? Like, I watched very, very closely up to the elections in the United States. I was watching a lot of the Democratic content creators. And I understand where they were coming from, because they had been so frustrated over years and years of talking to person after person after person that just does not want to accept facts and evidence. So I get their frustration, but I think the more frustration they showed, the more it swayed those people to vote for Trump as revenge. And people have admitted to that now. Like, I watched a live with Good Trouble last night, where there was an 18-year-old guy that regretted and was almost in tears over the fact that he voted for Trump. And he straight up said, I did it because you guys were telling us all we're stupid, so I just voted as a big F you. But now I realize what I did and I feel so bad about it. And he took a poll in the comments for how many other people felt that way. And out of, the 3,000 people in the live, there was at least 20 or 30 of them that said yes, that they voted just because they were angry at us for calling them uneducated and stupid. So, yeah, I agree the messaging has to change, but we need to figure out what that messaging is. I'm not 100% sure on that right now. I've been thinking about it every day.
Yeah,
It's a fine line. At the end of the day, it's going to be a fine line that we have to, because as much as we can't really go with the name calling, to allow them to believe that they're on equal footing and equal standing with the rest of us is also not something that we can allow them to have the luxury of thinking, because that stance is where they actually believe that they're on the same footing as us, that the things that they say are comparable, the alternative facts are comparable to our facts.
Yeah, so where do we go from here, right? What is that message? How do we draw that fine line? And how do we get them to at least open their minds up to the fact that maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of truth in what we're saying?
Well, I totally agree with you, Radical, 100%. But one of the guys that I watch here that I've learned a lot from in terms of how to approach this is that JB Poli-Sci. He does lives, I think, almost every night, and he lets one up at a time. There's no arguing between all these people. They ask their question. They're often conservative based, and he just debunks with facts. He's very calm, and it's just boom, boom, boom. And I think what he does has some effect without the fight. And he, like you say, Radical, he does not give them credence, depending on what they're talking about. And so I find him a very good guy to learn from in terms of how to approach this.
So I know JB, and he's amazing. And he's gone through a really long battle to get to where he is right now, being able to be so calm. At one point, he was getting threats and stuff from conservatives. Like, he went through a lot, That's actually, I went on his live a couple of nights ago, and that's exactly what we talked about. I was like, dude, how do you stay so calm? It's amazing to me. And he basically just said that he had to go through that period of being fully enraged and having all these issues to get to the point that he is now, where he's calm. And if somebody is going to be elevated in his live, he just kicks them. He doesn't even bother. So he only talks to conservatives that are at least willing to have a discussion. And I think that's why we see it so much on his live, is because if people do get really heated and rude, and he'll just kick them. He doesn't even bother with them.
I think Nerdy had something to say. Nerdy, are you there? Sorry about that.
Sorry, I tried interjecting a couple times, but everybody kept on talking. So what I was going to say is just regarding the, I think I lost it. I don't know. No, I'm serious. I think I lost it. It was just, it was there, and it was gone like twice. So, It was about how we're speaking. I don't know.
We were talking about JB keeping his calm.
No, it was before that. It was a couple people before that.
The messaging and coming together and getting that messaging where we're not belittling people, but we're also not taking shit from people.
Yeah. So one of the things that they were talking, like that they've been reflecting on in the US debate spaces is like, a lot of the people on the right, they don't want you to point them to information for them to go and look it up. They just want you to give them the answers right then and there, right? They want you to do their homework for them, which it's tedious, it's annoying, it's mind numbing, but it's it's probably what they need, right? And being a neurospicy person, like I realize now that like people learn different ways, right? Like I learn completely differently than Mrs. Radical would learn, or than even Frontline Feminist, even though we're both ADHD, right? 100%. Like we would have completely different ways of learning things, right? So sometimes you can't just say, go do your own research or go look this up or Google is free or something like that. You have to actually give them the information. But here's the thing. If you look at the policies that Kamala had like Harris had laid out, and then you had the policies that Trump had laid out, he had very, very small policy bullet point things, right? Because that's something that they can grab onto. They don't want 82 pages of policy. They want 16 pages of policy so that they can just grab onto those tiny little things. So I think that when we are talking to them about this kind of stuff, we need to break it down to the simple bullet points and just the stuff that is going to affect them, rather than the whole spectrum of what the policy is. It has to be just that one little piece kind of thing, right? So it goes back to the Venn diagram of breaking it down to this one little part right here.
Love that.
That's what I was going to say.
Love it. Anyone else? We actually, before I
we
open
do need to wrap up.
We need to wrap up. Nerdy has a show.
Yeah. So yeah, I have a trivia show after this. So final thoughts from anybody on the panel?
So for me, it's just that whole piece of coming back together in a community, respect, educate.
And maybe figure out a way to influence morality. I know that sounds really far-fetched right now, but I think a big problem that we are fighting is people's inability to think further than themselves, right? Like, care about thy neighbor. That seems to be very, very hard. And I don't know how to break through that. I don't. So that's something we got to think about, brainstorm.
We have to get over the myth that the left and the right are after different things. We're all after the exact same things, but how we perceive the world and how that is coming to us is where the problem lies.
That's an interesting thought. Treaty Bird?
Thanks. I was just typing up there. You know, my daughter says to me all the time that if we all could just practice love and kindness every day in everything we do, what a difference it would be. And I know, but it's so hard. And like, who just said something about love thy neighbor? Like, my Perry and I live in rural Alberta. We're both First Nation. Can you just imagine how challenging it is for us? And his previous employer was actually a convoyer. So, you know, it's hard for us to love our neighbor, but we try. And we do see the kindness in them too from time to time. But I feel it's so challenging right now in these times to practice that love and kindness because we're scared. I feel like we're all scared. And that's why we're, even on our side of the spectrum, getting a little more pushy and maybe sometimes more volatile and, you know, lashing out at others. And it's because we're scared. We're scared because we see what's happening.
You know, last year I had the privilege of working at the shelter during Christmas, and one of the things I loved to see was all these people coming to the door with Christmas dinners, right? Like, just not asked. It wasn't part of a meal plan in the community. We had dinner, but these people were all making these big Christmas dinners and plates. And one thing I just kept reminding myself, but you know, those cars were showing up and some of them had flags on. And some of them, in another time, I would just close the door on them. But they had hearts too, and they have people and friends and family that they're caring about too, and donating. And they weren't asking about anybody's political persuasion. And it just made me feel really good.
That's really nice.
Yeah, we have an opposition chirping in the comments. It's fun.
Well, on that note, should we wrap it up, Nerdy?
Yeah. So thank you, Frontline Feminist, for being here today. It was, I think it was a great conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed it. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the gifts. And I will hopefully have this up on YouTube in the morning. It's usually by 7 a.m. Mountain Time that I have it up there. I kind of try and schedule it for around then. So be on the lookout for it. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you go and subscribe to it. It's Beaver Politics, the exact same thing as it is here. Yeah, I think that's all I have.
And try to join the Beaver Dam if you can get onto the Discord and subscribe to the Beaver Dam. You know, the more people we get together, that's creating community, and we can start coming together that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a damn good time.
Yeah. we can gnaw on some stuff together.
Oh, wait, there is a hang on, there is a little where's the sound effects? After I said it's a damn good time, where's my drum? Where's the drum? Oh my god, where's the drum? There it is.
That's sick. I love that.
I use those all the time in trivia. So yeah. But if anybody doesn't know about my trivia, go follow Mistress Trash Panda. Her trivia starts in 25 minutes.
And it's super fun. They're doing
food trivia tonight. Food trivia tonight.
Yeah.
So
thank you,
right.
Frontline Feminist. You did a great job.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
everyone.
Good night.